Something's wrong with your porch light before you even know why. Mine had been burning every night for 12 years, and I never thought about it until the morning my sister parked outside my bakery in a rental car that still smelled like the lot, wearing sunglasses she didn't need indoors, asking for the children I'd raised since they were babies like she was asking for change. My name is Claire Dawson. I'm 38. Not long ago I sat at the respondent's table in a county courtroom while a lawyer in an expensive suit called me a kidnapper, and the 3 children I had raised for 12 years were listed on his papers as my victims. My sister cried into a tissue she never once used. 12 years earlier, she had pulled into my driveway, unbuckled her kids, and asked me for 1 hour. 1. I gave her 12 years of fevers and lunchboxes and night terrors. She gave herself a head start. Now she was back with fresh highlights and a folder that said I'd stolen her family. What none of them knew was that inside my bag, under my checkbook, sat an envelope. 11 years old. Never opened. A city name inked across the corner. What happened when a judge finally slid it open changed everything. I'll get there. Stay with me. Let me take you back to a Saturday morning in June 12 years ago. I was 26, renting a small house on Larkspur Lane, working nights at a diner, saving tips for culinary school. My sister's van pulled in at 9:15, muffler coughing. Brooke was 31 then, a widow of 13 months. She came up my walk carrying her youngest on her hip like something she'd grown tired of holding. Ava was 1, warm with a low fever. Owen was 3, half asleep on his feet. Nora was 5, carrying everyone's shoes. Brooke dropped 2 garbage bags of clothes on my porch the way you drop off donations. She smelled like cigarettes and vanilla lotion. She said she had an appointment she couldn't miss, couldn't bring the kids to. She pressed the diaper bag into my arms and smiled the smile that had gotten her out of everything since we were girls. Just 1 hour, Claire. I swear. I asked what kind of appointment starts on a Saturday. She was already walking backward down my steps. Nora waved until the van turned the corner. Then she asked if there were popsicles. There were. That was our whole afternoon. Popsicles, cartoons, a fever that broke by 4. 6, I called Brooke. At 7 again. By 10, I was standing at my window with Ava asleep on my shoulder, watching every set of headlights come up the street and keep going. The porch light stayed on all night. By Monday, her voicemail wouldn't even ring. A tired police sergeant told me grown adults are allowed to disappear. Her landlord let me into her apartment on Tuesday, hoping I'd cover the rent she owed. The place wasn't ransacked. It was empty. Closets bare. Crib already sold. A neighbor said a truck had come the Thursday before. The same week she'd handed me her children like the last item on a moving checklist. My mother, Margaret, sat in my kitchen that week with her hands folded and said the thing she'd keep saying for years. She'll come back, Claire. She's their mother. She said it like gravity. Something you'd be foolish to argue with. I wanted to believe her. Brooke's husband, Daniel, had died in a highway accident 13 months before. Grief does strange things. That's what I told myself while I bought a car seat at a yard sale. Then one night, tucking 5-year-old Nora into a fold-out couch in a room still full of my cookbooks, she looked up and asked, "Did we do something wrong?" "No, baby. Somebody did. But it was never you." People ask how you raise 3 children overnight with no warning. The honest answer is badly, then less badly, then one day you realize you've done it for a year. I put my culinary school application in a drawer and picked up every shift the diner would give me. I learned Ava only slept with the dryer running. I learned Owen wheezed when he cried too hard, and that a nebulizer costs real money even with a coupon. I learned shame is a luxury item, so I stopped buying it. I stood in line for assistance behind women who looked exactly as tired as I did, and nobody asked where their mother was. The first real wall I hit wasn't money. It was a clipboard. Kindergarten registration for Owen. 1 line. Signature of parent or legal guardian. I stood there holding a pen I had no right to use. The secretary was kind about it. "You're going to need paperwork, honey." And paperwork needed my sister. The clipboard was a warning. The emergency room was a verdict. 14 months in, Owen caught a chest cold that turned mean at 2 in the morning, his ribs pulling with every breath. I drove him in, and a nurse asked the question that changed my life. "Are you his mother?" "No." "Legal guardian?" "No." They treated him anyway. But a hospital social worker found me in the hallway at 4 a.m. with a folder and a gentle voice, and explained in plain English that I had no legal standing. None. I couldn't consent to surgery. I couldn't insure them or enroll them or defend them. If the wrong person made the wrong call, the county could place all 3 kids in foster care while the system decided what I was to them. Strangers' houses. Maybe separate strangers' houses. I sat in my car in the parking garage while the sun came up, Owen asleep against the window, and made the first cold decision of my life. A lawyer told me the cleanest road ran through juvenile court, and through Brooke's signature. Nobody had heard from her in 14 months, so I hired a private investigator too. $1,800 half up front. He found her in 9 days, working a lounge outside Tulsa under her maiden name. I emptied my culinary school fund and drove 900 miles. She met me at a motel off the highway because she didn't want me seeing where she lived. 14 months and my sister looked both better and worse. New nails and expensive jacket, eyes that had checked out of our family like a room she'd already paid for. I set the papers on the little table by the window. Consent to legal custody. A notary was coming at 3. Brooke flipped through the pages like a menu. She didn't ask about Ava's fever or Owen's lungs or whether Nora still carried everyone's shoes. She asked what was in it for her. I'm going to keep this part sealed a little longer. There was a price. She wrote it down herself on motel stationery, in the same looping handwriting our mother used to praise. I read what she wrote and something in me went very quiet and never got loud again. I paid it. The notary came at 3, watched her sign, stamped the seal. While I slid the folder into my bag, Brooke lit a cigarette and smiled at me through the smoke. You always wanted to play house with my kids. Congratulations. I stopped at the door and told her the truth, level as a shelf. I'm not playing anything. I'm just the one who stayed. Then I drove 900 miles home with a folder on the passenger seat worth more than my car, and stood in the doorway of the kids' room at midnight, listening to them breathe. What I traded for that signature, I'll tell you when I can say it out loud. We're not there yet. The court granted me legal custody that fall, and the next 10 years happened the way bread rises, slowly then all at once. I opened Larkspur Bakery 6 years ago with a small loan, and a used mixer I named out of spite for how much it cost. I bought the house on Larkspur Lane 5 years ago, the same house because the kids had already survived enough moving. I packed something like 4,000 lunchboxes. The kids called me Claire and never asked for more than that, and I never corrected them when the neighbors assumed I was their mother. Every June, 1 blank postcard showed up in my mailbox. No signature, no message. A beach in Florida. A casino in Nevada. Somebody out there knew our address and was keeping track of us, saying nothing at all. I kept them bound in a rubber band in the junk drawer, and tried not to understand what they meant. 8 months ago, my mother had a stroke at her kitchen table. A crossword half finished, the kettle still warm. She was 71. She died still believing her other daughter would walk in late, the way she was late to everything. She didn't come. The will was simple. A farmhouse and a life insurance payout went into a trust for her 3 grandchildren. I was named trustee. Brooke's name appeared exactly once, in the sentence lawyers write when a person has been thought about and decided against. But probate is thorough. A notice went out by certified mail to my sister's last known address, forwarded who knows how many times, like a flare fired over a dark ocean. 3 months. Nothing. I let myself believe the flare had sunk. Then on a Tuesday morning, a rental car parked outside my bakery, and a woman in a white coat stepped out, and my hands knew her before my eyes did. 12 years. Not a call. Not a birthday card. Not a word at our mother's grave. She pushed open my door like a customer and said, "Hello, Claire." She told me she'd been sick, that she was better now, that she'd thought about her children every single day. I looked at her fresh manicure while she said it, and thought about the junk drawer full of blank postcards, and asked her one question. "Where were you when Mom was buried?" She blinked. For half a second the performance stuttered. Then she leaned on my counter and got to it. "I want my babies back." I told her the children had a life, and that none of it was up for renegotiation over my pastry case. She smiled, and the shine dried out of her eyes like it had a switch. "You'll hear from someone," she said. A week later I did. Papers arrived in 2 layers like a bad cake. The first, a petition for custody claiming my 12-year-old consent was forged, calling my life a wrongful retention, using in one paragraph clearly written for the local paper, the word kidnapping. The second arrived the same week, a challenge to my mother's will, claiming I had poisoned a dying woman's mind against her firstborn. And that second filing told me the truth of why she'd really come back. Because if the will fell, the trust fell with it. The custody case was the violin. The will case was the wallet. That night, I sat the three of them down at dinner and told them, in a voice I'd rehearsed against the shower tile, that their mother was back in town, that there would be a process, that nothing about tomorrow would change. Owen shoved back from the table and went to shoot baskets in the dark. Ava went still, her ears going pink, and asked, "Does she want to meet us?" Hope in her voice with the safety off. And Nora, 17, arms folded, watching me the whole time like a poker player, waited until the little ones were gone, and asked the only question that mattered. Why did she leave? The real reason. I gave her the same smooth stone I'd been handing her since she was 5. She got lost, honey. Some people get lost. Nora set her plate down carefully, like it might go off, and looked at me with our mother's eyes. I'm not 5 anymore. She went upstairs. And I stood in my kitchen with my hands in cold dishwater, understanding two things at once, that my children were about to be fought over in public, and that the story I'd built to protect them had started to rot under the floorboards. Because somewhere in a locked box on the top shelf of my closet, behind the winter blankets, sat a manila envelope, sealed 11 years, with a city inked in the corner in my own handwriting. Tulsa. And I already knew that before this was over, someone was going to make me open it. The deposition happened in a conference room with bad coffee, and their lawyer, Richard Bennett, carved through 2 hours of small questions before he set the knife down without changing his tone. "Miss Dawson, did you ever pay my client money?" The room went still. "Yes," I said. He let it sit, then smiled unhurried. $15,000. Wired out of state. No further questions today. I watched the story assemble itself in that little room, the story he'd tell a courtroom soon. A lonely woman, aging out of her chances, waves money at her grieving sister, buys a signature, plays the martyr for 12 years. Every fact in it was mine. Every joint had been rewired to bear the opposite load. My lawyer, Rebecca Foster, laid out the choice the next morning with legal pad honesty. Produce the envelope and it ends both cases, but it goes into the public record forever, where 3 kids with library cards will someday read every line. Or keep it sealed, and fight on 12 years of character against a mother's tears in front of a judge trained to give mothers the benefit of the doubt. She didn't tell me which to choose. Good lawyers don't. That week, a court-appointed guardian toured my house, saw the growth chart penciled inside the pantry door, talked to each child alone. Ava came out hugging her sketchbook and found me at the sink. Did our mom ever try to come back? Even once. 12 years of protecting her, and the kindest sentence I'd ever built stood in my throat and refused to come out, because Nora was watching from the doorway, and one more smooth stone would cost me both girls. The mail saved me. A certified letter titled Confidential Settlement Proposal, and it was the most honest thing Brooke ever sent me because it had numbers instead of feelings. She'd withdraw the custody case, drop the will contest, sign a full surrender of her rights, the document I'd chased for a decade. In exchange, $80,000 and my resignation as trustee. No trial. No exhibit. No 17-year-old reading her mother's handwriting in a court file. I sat at my kitchen table that night with the checkbook open, and I'd already done the math. I could cover it barely ugly with a second mortgage. My hand knew how to write the numbers. It had done it before. Around midnight, the stairs creaked, and Nora came down and pulled out the chair across from me instead of the refrigerator, which she hadn't done in weeks. She looked at the checkbook, then at the letter beside it, and read the whole battlefield in about 4 seconds, because she's mine even where it's inconvenient. That's what she really came for, she said. Not a question. I didn't insult her by pretending otherwise. She leaned forward, elbows on the table, and took my whole plan apart in one breath. If you pay her again, she'll come back again. You know that. Then she said the thing that ended 11 years of policy at my kitchen table. Stop protecting me from my own life. She squeezed my shoulder and went back to bed. I sat with the lamp a while longer. Then I closed the checkbook, and at 3 in the morning I stood in my closet doorway, looking up at the gray box. At 9 the next morning I put it on Rebecca's desk, still cold from my trunk. No settlement, I told her. I bought her silence once. It expired. I'm done renting my family back 1 decade at a time. I took out the envelope with Tulsa inked on the corner, and for the first time in 11 years, I told her what was inside out loud. She didn't touch it right away. Then she walked me through it at funeral pace because she owed me that. Once it's evidence, it's public. Reporters can pull it. Neighbors can pull it. One day the kids can pull it, or some helpful stranger will pull it for them. Then they'll hear it from me first, I said. Every word before that courtroom does. We declined the settlement in writing before lunch. Their reply came within the hour. We'll see you at trial. The county courtroom smelled like old oak and radiator dust. Brooke took the stand in dove gray and gave the finest performance of her life. She'd been ill, she'd gotten steady, she'd tried for years to find her way back. Then, chin trembling at exactly the right frequency, she told the judge her sister had waved money at her, threatened her, and that the signature everyone kept showing around wasn't even hers. Bennett turned to the judge with the satisfaction of a man an inch from the finish line, and then to my lawyer. Your witness. Rebecca walked me through the honest inventory first, 12 years of my signature on the parent line of a child's life. Then Bennett came at me pleasantly, the way you'd approach a pie you intend to drop, building one question higher than the last, until he set down the one he'd been saving. Isn't it true, Miss Dawson, that you bought yourself 3 children for $15,000? I looked at Nora in the second row, in her ironed blouse, who had told me at a midnight kitchen table to stop protecting her from her own life. Then at the judge. My voice came out level, the voice I use when the ovens are on fire and panic is a luxury. No, sir. And I'd like to enter something into evidence. The bailiff carried the envelope up like it was lit. I found Brooke's face while it traveled. She had gone the color of unbaked dough. For 11 years she had banked on my silence. She was watching the account close. She asked me for 1 hour, I told the judge. I gave her children 12 years. The rest of that story is in your hands now. Judge Whitaker opened it with a letter knife unhurried. The original notarized consent, seal raised, signed in blue ink. A wire receipt for $15,000, drawn from an account labeled in my own handwriting culinary school. And 1 sheet of motel stationery. You want papers? $15,000. And I'll sign whatever you put in front of me. Don't come looking for me again. Tell them I'm dead if it's easier. He read it twice, took off his glasses, looked at Brooke for a long moment while she looked at the exit sign. Then he looked at me. Miss Dawson, do they know? Not yet, I said. He adjourned for lunch and said quietly that the afternoon could wait until the family had had its hour. There's a conference room off the courthouse hallway with a wobbly table, and that's where my family actually happened, more than in any courtroom. I sat the 3 of them down and put the copies face down under my hand, and I paid the bill I'd been running from for 11 years. The clipboard, the emergency room, the motel outside Tulsa, the postcards, 1 a year, our address in her pocket the whole time. Then I turned the papers over. Ava made a sound I will hear for the rest of my life and folded into Owen, who stared at the wall, jaw working. Nora read the stationery standing up twice, then set it down. You let me spend 12 years wondering what I did wrong, she said. Quiet. The shout would have hurt less. You knew, and you let me wonder. I didn't defend myself because she was right, and because I finally understood the flaw in the beam I'd built everything on. I hadn't only been protecting them. I'd been protecting myself from watching their faces do exactly what their faces were doing now. It was yours, I told them. I'm sorry. It took a courtroom to make me brave. I slid the copies across to Nora, all of them, and put the choosing where it should have lived all along. You decide when they're ready to read the rest. You. Not me. Ava wiped her face on her sleeve. Did you ever want to give us back? Not for 1 hour. The afternoon session took 40 minutes. With the original consent in evidence and a handwriting expert on standby, the forgery claim wasn't just weak, it was perjury with a runway. Bennett saw it. After a whispered conference, Brooke withdrew the allegation on the record, which meant conceding the note, which meant conceding the price. Judge Whitaker denied the petition from the bench. 12 years without one phone call, $1, one birthday card is not an illness, he said. It is a decision renewed daily. The will contest went with it. You cannot claim your mother was poisoned against you while your own handwriting explains exactly how she came to be disinherited. In the hallway afterward, Brooke slowed when she reached Nora. My daughter, I'd earned the word by then, stood straight and looked at her mother the way you look at weather moving off. Brooke's mouth opened, and whatever was in it, she swallowed. She turned to me instead. You were always better at keeping things than me, she said. Even them. Then she walked out into the June light, and not one of the 3 kids moved a foot in her direction. 6 weeks later, with the abandonment finding on the books, Rebecca filed to terminate Brooke's rights and start adoption proceedings for Owen and Ava. Nobody objected. Nobody appeared. Nora turned 18 that October. She sat down at my kitchen table on a Sunday night, slid a printout across to me and said, "File one for me too. Adult adoption." She'd researched it herself the way she researches everything. "Change my last name while you're at it," she said, and then because she saw my face, she looked at her hands and finished it. "You're not just the one who stayed, Claire. You're my mom. The paperwork's just late." I signed it, and I did not manage a steady hand, and no one at that table held it against me. The gray box sits on the counter now, unlocked, mostly empty. In June, a letter came addressed to all 3 kids, postmarked Nevada, looping handwriting on the front. I didn't open it. I didn't screen it. I set it on the kitchen table with the bills, told them what it was, and left the room. Through the door I heard them decide together, voices low. They put it in the junk drawer with the postcards. Maybe someday. Their call. She asked me for 1 hour 12 years ago on a porch I still sweep every morning. Her hour is finally up. And the kids, they know all of it now and they're still here. Blood can tell you where you came from. But it's the people who stay, who show up at 4 in the morning with a nebulizer, who tell you the truth even when it costs them the version of themselves they liked best. They're the ones who tell you where you belong. Family isn't the name on a birth certificate. It's the name on 4,000 lunchboxes. It's who's still standing in the kitchen when every set of headlights has kept on going.